Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual Haunted Hurst campus tour. Thank you so much for joining us. There's so many of you out there. We're so excited. Of course, we would love to have you here on campus with us, but we're thrilled that you joined us virtually, I think from all over the country. So thank you so much. My name is Lindsay Frank. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Mercyhurst. And I am joined by my colleagues in the advancement office, Ryan Palm, Megan Hubert, and Mitchell Marsh, and we will be your tour guides this evening. Now, a couple rules as we begin. Please use the chat function if you'd like to share anything or if you'd like to chat back and forth. And please do keep yourselves on mute so that everyone can hear all of the stories from us here on campus. So one more thing before we begin, there is a friendly scavenger hunt going on here in Old Main. So if you hear some background noises, those are some of our students running to and from as they compete in their Halloween scavenger hunt. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we will begin. We will take you all over campus this evening on tonight's haunted tour, but here I am as we begin in Old Main. I'm in the chapel foyer. As you can see, kind of right around this way is the chapel. And our very first story is a story that you're going to hear a little bit more about all throughout the evening. And it is the story of the ring. It's a very infamous story about Mercyhurst, a very infamous haunted story. And we've got a bunch of them to share with you tonight so that by the end of this tour, you can decide for yourself, is Mercyhurst really haunted? Yes, the ring. This is the story of the ring. We've got a couple versions of it, a couple different experiences that people have had with the infamous ring. So the first one we have to share with you tonight is the story of a young Mercyhurst student. And she was in love and she became engaged. And she was so over the moon to be marrying the love of her life. Now, this is many, many years ago, everyone. So they're engaged. She was given this beautiful ring for their engagement, and her fiance actually went off to war. So while he was at war, she actually received a letter saying that he was killed in the war. She was just absolutely devastated. So she went running to the chapel, looking for something to console her. She was totally devastated. And at that very moment, knowing that her beloved fiance, the love of her life, had passed away, she decided to remove her ring and place it on the infant baby Jesus, the infant of Prague, the statue in the chapel. So she placed her ring on the statue, and at that moment she said to herself, because I cannot be with the love of my life, I'm going to give myself to the Lord. And she decided to become a Sister of Mercy. So fast forward a couple years later, and it was another letter that she received, and it was actually from her fiance. Come to find out, he was not killed in the war. He was alive. Again, she flew into a fit of rage. She couldn't believe that this was happening. Here she was, suddenly torn between her staying with her vows of being a Sister of Mercy, or is she supposed to return to the love of her life? She was completely torn. She had these two loves of her life, the Lord and, of course, her fiance. She ended up falling into just a deep, deep depression over this horrible decision that she was faced with. At the time, the sisters decided it would really be best for her to kind of just go away, relax, rest a little bit. So they actually placed her in a room up in Old Main, and it was from that moment on known that ring that she was received from her fiance, it had horrible and special and magical powers. It was then known that the ring should never be touched ever since what happened to this poor girl. It said that she ended her life, and that after dark, it was really known that you should not enter into Old Main or into the chapel. And of course, here we are after dark. So one does not know what we will see on tonight's tour. I'm going to now head off. Again, you're going to hear a little bit more about the ring tonight. We've got a couple other stories about this infamous ring, and maybe we'll even see it tonight. We'll see. So I'm going to turn my camera around here Again, we're leaving the chapel foyer and we're headed down the hall into the admissions south parlor. Again, everyone, you're welcome to use that chat function if you'd like to say anything or share any stories of your own. And I'm now going to pass it off to my colleague, Mitchell Marsh.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well. We are now in the admissions parlor here at Mercyhurst. This is where we welcome prospective students and guests when they're here visiting the campus. But actually, years ago, this used to be the president's office. And then years before that, it was actually used for special events. And the special event that we'll be talking about tonight, the ghost story, has to do with funerals. So this is where the story starts. Years ago in the early 1900s, we had funerals on campus that would take place in the Christ the King Chapel, and then they would do viewings here in this space. Well, on that frightful night, we did have a funeral that took place, and the woman was brought from the chapel to here to have calling hours and viewing hours. And then, unfortunately, because it is Erie, Pennsylvania, there was a terrible winter storm that took place that night. So the funeral employees were unable to come to campus to retrieve the body. That being said, the Sister Superior at the time decided that what they would do would leave the coffin here and then figure the things out as the weather cleared the next day. And ever since, would figure out what to do the next day. And when she came down, she entered through these doors here, and what she found was very, very distraught. The doors that you can see right here behind me had blown open. So they were wide open. The snow from the winter storm had filled the room, and the coffin was blown open, and there was no body to be found. However, upon further inspection, when she looked at the ground, she could see these footprints leading away from Old Main. And it's said ever since that night that there have been seen skeletons walking through the halls, but specifically in this office and through the halls of Old Main. Now, Sister Superior, of course, didn't want that to happen, didn't want that to circulate campus. So this is one of the lesser known stories, because that night they decided to secure this door so nobody could enter it or exit through it. And that's the story of the skeleton ghost here on campus. And up next, I'm going to pass it back over to Lindsay. There we go.
Thank you, Mitchell. Well, everyone, that is our story for here in the admissions south parlor. Again, I'm located right now in Old Main here on campus. And for our alumni that are out there, we actually have some prospective students out there. So, of course, we hope that these tales don't scare you away. But I think you'll really love it here if you end up coming to Mercyhurst, and you can experience for your own selves if Mercyhurst really is haunted. But for our prospective students, we are in the main building here on campus, and I'm going to be heading down the hall of the main floor of Old Main. Now, the Old Main building was built in the 20s, and we opened here at Mercyhurst in 1926. This building today houses some administrative offices and is definitely, I would say, known to be one of the most haunted buildings on campus, of course, because it was built so many years ago. And you just never know what you'll see. Oh my gosh, it's a ghost. Did everybody see that? Did you guys see that? Oh. Holy smokes, I just saw a ghost right here in Old Main. I told you, everyone, you just never know what you will encounter here in this building. Old Main and Egan Hall, which is connected, are absolutely haunted, and we just saw for our own selves a live ghost. Our next stop is here in the office of the president, and we will have our next tale right inside. Next, I'm going to pass off the camera to my colleague, Megan, who will tell you our next story.
All right. Hi, everyone. So my story is about some of the paintings that we have on campus here. So we have a few different paintings that used to hang along the walls of Old Main. And there was a man who painted these, and a lot of them were of the Irish countryside and different cottages. And so after he finished painting all of these paintings, he actually fell into a deep depression and tragically died. And after that, all of his paintings still hung in the hallways. And it said that he haunts his paintings and that he stares at people through the windows of the cottages. So that brings me to why we're actually in the president's office tonight. There's actually another painting in which a single girl stands. And this painting is reportedly very haunted, particularly her eyes. They actually follow people as they walk back and forth, they open and close, and they're said to even glow red. So I'm actually going to show you the painting, but I have to warn you to be careful because it said if you stare into the eyes of the painting that you are cursed forever. We definitely don't need to be cursed. So I'm not going to look. I'm going to tilt my camera so you guys can see the painting that I'm talking about. Everybody sees it? If anyone's brave enough to look into the eyes. So very spooky, definitely would not want to have an office in here. So I'm going to pass you back over to Lindsay.
Thank you, Megan. I've actually gone out of my way ever since arriving here at Mercyhurst to avoid that painting. I refuse to look into her eyes. Definitely not worth it to be cursed. All right, everyone. So we're now actually going to be heading out of the old main building, and we're headed off to kind of the center of campus. Our next spot that we're headed to is Baldwin Hall. Now, I know some of you out there may have lived in Baldwin Hall, which is cool. And you're going to hear another tale about a version of the Ring story that was experienced in Baldwin Hall. Here's a picture up close of Baldwin Hall, which is where we're headed. It's a little dark out here, but I think you'll be able to see just fine. And I see some people in the chat are letting us know that they lived in Baldwin Hall, which is very cool. Baldwin Hall opened in 1970, and it is still today a freshman residence hall for our female students. So for any prospective students out there, you might have a chance to live there, which is exciting. And you can see we're headed to our Trinity Green. It's our center park area on campus. For our alumni, you of course remember the bell and our Canterbury clock, which is in the center, but you might not remember some of these tents that you'll see around campus. It's been one of our many ways of handling the COVID crisis here on campus. We have some outdoor areas that our students can eat, that they can gather for extra safety. So lots of protocols taking place to make our students and our employees very safe. And there's the clock that we all know and love. And just one mention too, if you guys have seen the masks that our staff are wearing this evening, really cool face masks with the Old Main image and Mercyhurst University on them. They're navy blue and they fit very nicely, I think. If you're interested, you can support the Mercyhurst Annual Fund and receive masks in the mail. And we'll put the link in the chat for you. You can visit mercyhurst.edu/masks to support the annual fund and to receive the masks. And hopefully you'll wear them all around. All right, everyone, you can see Baldwin Hall here in the distance, and I'm going to pass the camera off to my colleague, Ryan Palm.
All right, hello, everyone. We're out here in front of Baldwin Hall, a residence hall built in 1970. Many of you, as you've noted in the chat, live in the hall. So Lindsay started us tonight by telling us the story of the ring. And as she alluded to, we were going to come back to it again. So some years after Lindsay's story completes, there's a resident that lives here in Baldwin Hall, a young freshman girl, hears the story and just doesn't believe it. She doesn't believe in ghosts. She doesn't believe in hauntings. She thinks it's hogwash, and finally earns up the courage and the gumption to march over to Christ the King Chapel, walks into the Queen's Chapel, finds the statue, sees the ring, and for some strange reason, takes the ring off the statue, puts it on her finger, and she doesn't die. She doesn't vanish. She doesn't turn into a ghost. She's fine. She feels great. No problem. Feeling like she's solved the mystery, she takes the ring back to her room right here in Baldwin Hall, takes it there, wears it around, decides she's going to tell her friends about it tomorrow, takes the ring off to go to sleep, places it on a dresser in her room. She wakes up the next morning and notices there's this green mist, this circular fog that's hovering right above the ring. She thinks it's strange, doesn't know what to make of it, but dismisses it as, who knows, that could be anything. A while passes, the mist does not fade, it stays. So she reaches out to maintenance and says, hey, I think I have a problem. Can somebody come check? So the loyal maintenance workers come in, they check the building, they check her room, the radiator. The building's only a few years old at this point, so the technology works fine. Everything seems to be normal. They have no explanation for this magical mist that's hanging above the ring. Soon after, that same day, the furniture in the room starts to warp. Right on the dresser where the ring sits, the wood is warping in the direction of the ring. The bed and the desk that are nearby also start to warp. Now the girl can't explain that. That's certainly not the radiator. It's certainly not a common phenomenon. Again, the building's only a few years old. The furniture shouldn't be falling apart already. She gives it one more night, wakes up the next day. The mist is still there. The furniture still warped. She starts to panic, freaks out, doesn't know what to do. Finally gives in, thinks maybe this ring actually has some spookiness, some haunting to it. She takes the ring off the dresser, runs across campus, goes back into Christ the King Chapel, puts that ring back on the finger of the statue and the infant, goes back to her room, and magically the mist is gone. The fog is gone. The presence that she felt in the room, gone. Everything seems to be back to normal, which led this poor young girl to realize that maybe that ring really is haunted, as everybody said it was. The ring appears yet again. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. Wow, that is very spooky about Baldwin Hall. Very creepy. And I promise, I don't think Baldwin Hall is entirely haunted. It really might have been just the presence of that ring. So it was smart of the girl to return it back to its rightful place. So I'm going to flip the camera around here. Again, we're going to walk back through the park here, and we're actually headed down to our grotto. So here's a picture of the grotto so everyone can see, because it is a little dark out this evening. We're headed down there for our next story. The grotto here on campus holds the statue of Our Lady of Lourdes. And the grotto was built by Father William Sullivan, who was our very first chaplain here at Mercyhurst. Father Sullivan actually had help from many young men to build the grotto, which was being built during the Depression. And actually, in exchange for their help in building, he would offer them to go through the line in the Egan dining hall to get a nice hot meal. So very hospitable and merciful of Father Sullivan. And we'll see Sullivan Hall, for whom it's named after Father Sullivan, our very first chaplain. So for any of our prospective students out there, we're walking back through the park area of Trinity Green, and over there is Old Main, and Egan Hall is just in the distance. When we wrap around, we'll be on the front side of Egan Hall and Old Main for some more stories. We're hearing where everyone's lived on Baldwin and Egan Hall. Very cool. And if you have any scary stories of your own, of course, feel free to share those in the chat. We'd love to hear your stories. Maybe they'll even make it onto next year's tour. All right, so we're approaching our grotto here. Again, it's a little dark out this evening. Very spooky. I hope we don't see any more ghosts. That other one that we saw really freaked me out. What about you guys? I can't believe it. All right, so we're approaching our grotto here, which is down this hill. And we will hear, the grotto is just in the distance through the trees there, and we'll hear from Megan for our next story.
All right, so you can kind of see it behind me, maybe not too well, but the area behind me, what it used to be was a pond way back before the grotto was built. And in the very early years of Mercyhurst, one of the nuns was taking a walk around the pond, just taking a break around campus, and she actually fell unconscious and drowned in that pond. And it was very tragic. And they told the story to all of the young freshmen who had lived near there. And those freshmen didn't believe it. They thought it was a complete hoax and that didn't actually happen. So about 5 years after that, a girl was dared by her friends to actually go to the pond and stare into it and look at her reflection. And so this girl decided to do it, and she looked into the pond, and she actually saw the reflection of the nun who had died staring back at her, which is very creepy. But then she felt a force push her into the pond, and she flew in. Luckily, her friend was actually there to save her, so no one drowned. But shortly after that, they had decided to drain the pond. So as they drained the pond, they noticed something very unusual. They actually found a large amount of animal bones, which is very odd. And the only reason for that could be some rumors of some occult practices that had happened in that area, but they weren't sure. Very strange. But what's even weirder is that they couldn't find the body of the nun, and it was never found to this day. So it is said that still, if you're in the grotto at night, you can actually sometimes see her reflection, whether that be in puddles or if you see her spirit, because she still wanders that area today searching for her lost remains. So if I were you, I would not hang out at the grotto at night. I'm going to pass you back over to Lindsay here.
Very spooky, Megan. Thank you for the grotto story. And I don't see any puddles, and if I did, I definitely would not be looking in. To my right here, we have the grotto dining hall, Grotto Commons, and we see some of our students in there having their dinner. Oh, they're gonna, maybe they'll wave to us. Hello, friendly students waving. Oh, hi, Chris. Some of our nice students in there. To my left here is Macaulay Hall, which is a freshman boys residence hall. So for some of our prospective students out there, you might have a chance to live there. And it's very nice because it's right next to the cafeteria. So I know a lot of the young men enjoy living there. Proximity to the food is always good. And as we head around this way, in the front of me is Egan Hall. And now Egan Hall for me is kind of a special place. I was actually the last group of girls to live in Egan Hall. It was a residence hall up until 2009 when it was converted into office space, which is when our Ward Hall, freshman residence hall, was being built. So I was the last group to live there, and it's actually now where my office is located. So our advancement staff works in Egan Hall, and Egan Hall is maybe the most or the second most haunted spot on campus. So we definitely have a lot of spooky stories coming from Egan Hall, and we're almost to our spot to hear the next story. In the distance, of course, you see our beautiful Old Main and the O'Neill Tower. Beautiful day or night, isn't she? Of course, Egan Hall was the original residence hall here on campus, built at the same time as the old main building. It originally housed the students, and the Sisters of Mercy actually lived in the building as well. And here's a close-up of Egan Hall, and we're headed up to that area just now. Another view of Old Main. And of course, the Grotto Commons dining area is located on the lowest level of Egan Hall, which is where we just saw some of our students. Old Main in the front. And we've got Egan Hall just over here. And here we are for our very next stop. All right, so lots of paranormal activity, like I said, taking place here in Egan Hall. And one of the most infamous stories that comes out of Egan Hall, of course, there's many. And if you've lived here and experienced anything firsthand, definitely share it with us in the chat. I myself always felt a little spooky at nighttime whenever I was living there my freshman year. But this story, oh, it's a scary one. Many years ago, there was a fire that broke out in Egan Hall. And of course, it didn't do a ton of damage. Here the building stands, of course, but what it did was the heat of the fire coursing through the hallway actually sealed closed the doors to each individual room. And one of the students was trapped in her room because of the heat that sealed the door closed. And because of this, she was horribly burned all over her face, very badly burned. So she went to the hospital, they rushed her there, and they ended up saying, you know, for her mental state, it'd really be best for her to not see a mirror. She's in a bad shape. Let's not let her see a mirror. Well, she, of course, snuck a mirror, took a look at herself, caught a glimpse, and just completely was so shocked, dropped the mirror, and it shattered into a million pieces. And that's where the story begins, really, is that it's said back when the building was a residence hall, and even still today, that it's her spirit wandering through the building because mirrors randomly would just fall off of a dresser, fall off of a wall, mounted on a wall, fall down out of the bathroom, fall down and shatter. And it's definitely this girl's spirit roaming the halls, and her gust of wind knocking these mirrors down. So if that ever happened to you, you were probably being followed by this ghostly spirit of the girl from Egan Hall. So I'm now going to flip the camera around again, and we're headed, of course, across the front of Old Main. You can see Old Main to the right. And in the distance, we're headed off to the area of the Taylor Little Theater for our very next story. Anybody out there have any stories of their own from Egan Hall? Make sure you share them with us in the chat. I bet you have them, because there was definitely some spookiness happening in Egan Hall. All right, so our next stop is over here in the Taylor Little Theater. Just to give our prospective students an idea of where we are, this is Old Main and our tower. We're just going to go through this little archway over here off to the left to the original campus theater, the Taylor Little Theater. Thank you, Ryan. And next we'll hear again from Ryan Palm for our next story.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So hopefully you've been here before. This is Weber Hall. It was built in the early 1950s, originally home to the original campus library, which was right above me here, if you can look right over my shoulder. Also inside this building is the Taylor Little Theater, which is down below, right down those steps. The story reads that at one point in history, there was a maintenance worker who was working up in the library, in the hallway that you can see behind me, and was kind of wandering out to clean the balcony. He was wiping down the rail, he was cleaning the windshield or windows, and unfortunately he fell from the balcony some 30, 40 feet straight down below into the lobby of the Taylor Little Theater. At the time, there was a fountain, a beautiful fountain that was at the base of that lobby. And unfortunately, this maintenance worker was impaled on this fountain and passed away. It was obviously a very sad moment, very unfortunate, a terrible accident. And out of respect for that worker, the fountain was shut off and it was not to be run for many years. Well, as things happen, some many years later, there was a big event to be happening in the Taylor Little Theater. And the powers that be said, we need that fountain on. It'll make the experience. We need it on. So they turned the fountain on. It was ready for a big event. And unfortunately, the fountain ran red, blood red. They let it run, it was red, 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 red. They brought in the maintenance workers. It might've been the same maintenance guys that worked on Baldwin Hall in our first story. They came over, they looked at the fountain, they couldn't figure it out. They said maybe it's some rust buildup, it hadn't been open for a long time, who could say? But they couldn't really figure it out. They said if you let it run for a few more days, it'll probably work itself out. Well, by this point, the Mercyhurst Library had expanded, and the space above us, which used to be the original library, had become a dance studio. Many of you may have known it, maybe you've seen it, maybe you've danced in it, but it was a beautiful space for our dancers to practice. Well, one day a dancer is finishing up practice. She wanders out onto the ledge, and unbeknownst to her, she falls. She falls off that ledge, falls down into the lobby that we described before, and she falls. She unfortunately hits the fountain. She breaks her hip, but she survives. So she comes to, everybody is so concerned. And right away, they naturally ask her, what happened? Did you fall? Did somebody push you? What's the story? And right away, she says, I have no recollection. She doesn't remember anything. She doesn't remember dancing near the ledge. She doesn't remember looking over it. She doesn't remember trying a new move. Nothing. She has no idea how she fell. And so, of course, immediately the whispers start that maybe it was the ghost of the maintenance man. So just that after those few days of the fountain being run, they turned off that fountain. They turned it off forever. Unfortunately for that young girl, by the time that she came to and was healed in the hospital, she had really gone through some difficulties mentally. And she unfortunately was committed to a mental institution where she lived the rest of her life. She was never able to return to Mercyhurst and died of natural causes in that mental institution. The stories say that any given moment around this building, you can find one of two ghosts. You might see the ghost of the maintenance man, who's been seen cleaning the facilities, the job he loved to do so much, cared so much about this building, he still roams the halls cleaning. And there's been other people who have seen the ghost of the girl, the dancer, that she still haunts people that are dancing on the stage at Taylor Little Theater. There's been other individuals, even one of Lindsay's friends, who swear that they've seen a dancer out front of the Little Theater as recently as less than 10 years ago. So the ghost, two ghosts, disconnected by dozens of years here at Mercyhurst, still haunting the same space in Weber Hall and Taylor Little Theater. And we'll give you to Megan, who's going to take us on our next story.
Thank you. Let me flip everybody around here so you can see where we're going. All right, so we're actually heading outside over to our Magnolia Garden. It's a really beautiful spot on campus. All right, let me flip it around here. Okay, so here's where our next story is. You can kind of see behind me. So this area here back in the 1930s and 40s, before it was the Magnolia Garden, actually used to be an area with a bunch of picnic tables in it. And this is where the nuns would come out and they would eat their lunch and they would take breaks and just kind of sit outside when they weren't working. So there was one nun in particular who was always out here. She was always in the corner smoking, was very quiet, and she continued to do that for many years when she was at Mercyhurst until about the 1940s when she died. So after that, to this day, people have said they've still seen a woman smoking in the far corner here of the Magnolia Garden. And this woman is known to be the ghost of that smoking nun. And the reason they always thought she was a ghost is no one ever recognized her. She would disappear at times and then pop back up, and she would never say anything and just sit in the corner. So as most of you know, Mercyhurst is non-smoking today, but there have been tales of people still seeing a woman in that far back corner smoking, or even little puffs of smoke where she used to spend so much of her time back in the day. I personally have never seen her, but definitely let us know in the chat if any of you have ever come across this nun or anything kind of spooky in this garden behind me. So I'm going to hand you right back over to Lindsay.
Thank you, Megan. Very spooky for sure. All right, and now everyone, we're headed back into Old Main. We're gonna go right through these side doors here and bring you right back where we started. We have one final tale for you this evening. Thank you, Ryan. And the final tale will bring us back to Christ the King Chapel. We're actually going to catch a glimpse of the Infant of Prague statue, where it is said that the girl originally placed the infamous ring. So here we are back in the chapel, and I have one final story for you. And of course, it ends with the ring. Now, this final story really may have been kind of the tipping point, the last straw when it came to the ring. And Kathy says, Mercyhurst is one of the prettiest campuses. I agree, Kathy, it really is. So again, here we are in the chapel. So this final story is about the ring. And then when I'm finished, we're gonna head right over to my right into the Queen's Chapel, which is where the statue is located. So, like I said, it was the tipping point, the final kind of experience with the ring. It is said that a young girl, one of our students, now this is years ago, one of our students, her boyfriend was coming to town to visit her, and she said, oh, I'm going to play a trick on him. I'm going to go to the chapel, I'm going to steal the ring, and I'm going to put the ring on and, play a trick on him, say we're engaged, kind of see what her boyfriend thinks about being engaged to her and freak him out a little bit. So she took the ring, she was preparing for his arrival, and of course that ring came back with a vengeance and its horrible powers that it has. The boyfriend was killed in a car accident on State Street. And of course everybody said, oh my gosh, she never should have taken that ring. So really, like I said, this was the last straw for the ring. The administration kind of caught word. This ring had horrible powers to it. So it is said that after this horrible car accident of this girl's boyfriend, the administration, there's a couple stories here now. The administration may have taken the ring and locked it away somewhere. It's also said that it's been buried somewhere on campus. But what's even crazier, you guys, is that every now and then the ring is spotted still on the Infant of Prague statue. Now, we were in here a couple of days ago, and it was on the statue. And remember, if you touch the ring, you will be cursed forever. If you take it off of the statue, horrible, horrible things can happen to you. Now, this isn't like the story of in the president's office of the girl in the eyes. You can look at the ring, but you cannot touch it. So we're going to take a look over here in the Queen's Chapel and see if we can see if the ring is there tonight. All right, put my camera here. Okay, everyone. We're off to see the statue. My coworkers are with me because I'm afraid to go in here at night. Oh my gosh, everybody, can you see it? So this is the statue that we've been talking about. And of course, there is the ring. Now, I don't want to get too close because I wouldn't dare touch it. The ring is in fact there. So maybe it was buried, maybe it was taken, maybe it wasn't, but there it is tonight. And we just can't believe it. There it is in the chat. The ring is there. So maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, maybe you touched it. I hope you haven't touched it because of course it has those horrific powers to it. Definitely one of our most famous stories here at Mercyhurst is the story of the ring. Well, everyone, that is all that we have for you tonight. We are so pleased that you joined us this evening. Before I let you go, I want to remind you that if you've really enjoyed seeing our staff wearing these great Mercyhurst masks, then you can, of course, support the Mercyhurst Annual Fund by visiting mercyhurst.edu/masks. And you can support us there and receive the masks. We'll get them in the mail to you ASAP. So definitely we'd appreciate your support in wearing those masks all around wherever you may be. Next time you get a chance to come to campus, we can't wait for it to be safe for you to return to your alma mater and join us again here on campus. You will have the choice. You'll have the opportunity to walk the halls, to walk campus, and you can see, is Mercyhurst really haunted? Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night and carpe diem.